guys, welcome back to Informed Beauty. So today is another beauty content video, and I would like to talk about something that many people have already talked about. It's probably been beaten to death, but it's my first time trying it and I'm excited. And it is the Modern Renaissance palette by Anastasia Beverly Hills. Now, I'm not 100% sure if it is pronounced Anastasia. I always thought it was Anastasia. But everybody that I listen to on YouTube says Anastasia, so I'm just gonna roll with that. I bought this palette about a month ago, and it was right before my trip to Ontario. And just before that, I decided to get myself an early birthday present. I was thinking of getting this palette for quite some time, a couple years actually. But because I had an Urban Decay palette, I told myself I don't need it. I don't need to spend money on another palette, just because I try to not have too many palettes. I try to go through one high-end palette at a time, just to be less wasteful, and just because I know that when makeup, I have a lot of makeup. I decluttered makeup recently. I just tend to not use a lot of it if I buy a whole bunch of palettes. So, or I get a bunch of palettes from friends. Sometimes friends will declutter and give me stuff. But I did end up deciding to get it just because I felt like I would really enjoy the colors in it. I heard really good things about the formula, and my birthday was coming up, so it was kind of another excuse, another reason. But so it is, I believe it was $55 Canadian at my local Sephora. I'm sure many of you have heard this many times, you've watched many videos about this palette, but I figured that it would be worthwhile to share my opinion and my take on it because I've been really gung-ho about trying it for so long. So this was my first time trying any of the Anastasia Beverly Hills palettes. I've never had any experience with them before. Let me just show you the actual palette inside. For those of you that aren't familiar, I guess this part of the video will be more informative for you. But it does come with a mirror. It is a magnetic closure. The exterior is made up of velvet. It's like a velvet type of material. A lot of people have complained that it gets dirty easily or dusty easily. So far, mine's been pretty good. I used it pretty much every single day when I was on vacation in Ontario. So I had a chance to really dabble in it. I actually used it for a engagement photo shoot. So we did a second engagement photo shoot, but this time in Ontario. Our first one was in Alberta. So it was another kind of test. I didn't want to try it for the first time for the shoot, so I made sure to try it multiple times with different colors, different techniques before the shoot happened. And I am wearing it on my eyelids today. And of course, my camera is not that great, and I really apologize. My lighting isn't great. So I feel like the makeup that I put on for videos is never, you don't really get to see the full extent of it, unfortunately. As my channel progresses and maybe as I get more professional equipment, then you will be able to, I will be able to showcase what I actually put on my face a little bit more. But without further ado, let's just go take a look inside. You will actually see that I've used quite a bit of it already. There's some dents in some of the colors and some of the sections here. So it is, unlike the Urban Decay palette, it's all square sections that you have each shade in. This particular, let me just take out the brush because this is gonna bother me. It's gonna try to fall out constantly. So this shade right here, so Tempura, is the shade that is the one that I use for my eyelid before I put any other shade on. And it's a good base. It almost acts like a good eye primer or something that you would put on top of an eye primer. And it just brings out the colors of the other shadows a little bit more, prevents your eyelids from getting really greasy. So I do find that's a good color. It's a good formula for that. And then what I found really great about this palette is it's a lot more versatile than I thought. I thought that pretty much all the looks that you could create with this palette would be like the rosy looks that it's well known for. So like red ochre, the Venetian red, or the love letter, or Rio Gar, for example. But really, you can create some more neutral looking looks, more beige brown type of looks if you want to, and that's what I did for my engagement shoot. I believe for my engagement shoot I had used Cypress Umber right there, and I used Warm Taupe, And there's a chance that I probably also used raw sienna or golden ochre. So you do have options where you can create a more neutral look and you don't have to go with the reds or the pinks and the oranges. And what I also like is that you can definitely create everyday looks quite easily, but you can also do like a really dramatic night look as well. So it is a lot more versatile than I expected. And I believe there's one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. I want to say eight mattes. And then there's two, I would say, metallic ones, which are Vermeer and Primavera. So that's Vermeer, that's Primavera. And then the antique bronze, it's not quite the same metalliciness as the other two that I mentioned, but it does have some um, sparkle in it. And I know it's not visible in the video, but that's what I've seen. And I know you can go on like the Sephora website and it'll describe every shade. I'm not an expert in that. I'm just kind of telling you what I'm seeing as a non-makeup artist, non-expert. Um, Although I know some of you view me as a makeup expert, I certainly do not put myself on a pedestal as a makeup artist or anything like that. I'm just simply interested in makeup. I love to learn more about makeup, and I like to share my experiences and also the knowledge that I've acquired about makeup with you guys. So that's kind of the place that I'm coming from. I'm just really excited to tell you about the formula. So I know a lot of people have talked about the formula, how much they love it, and really the reason why it's such a great formula is it's a very soft. So when you dip your brush into it, you can, it just, it creates a dent really easily. Whereas with the Urban Decay palette, it's kind of like a harder formula, for lack of a better word. And so I find that it is very pigmented. And although it's a very powdery formula, I don't personally find that there's a lot of fallout. So that could just be me, because I do know a lot of people have talked about a lot of fallout with the palette, but they still put up with it because it's so pigmented and so easy to blend. And boy, am I telling you, it is the easiest formula to blend ever. I have never used an eyeshadow palette or any eyeshadow that has been this easy to blend. It is an absolute dream. I thought the Urban Decay palette was easy to blend. This is a whole other ball game. But oddly enough, the Urban Decay palette, I actually get more fallout with it. And I think part of the reason is because it is a harder formula. I press harder with my brush, and then I end up getting too much formula or too much product on my brush, and then I get more fallout on my cheeks. So oddly enough, I find that the Renaissance palette I actually have less fallout with. Um, but like I mentioned, it's so easy to blend. So I've been doing more looks where I go into like under the brow bone and like into where the crease is, like where your eyelid creases. And it's just because it's so easy to blend, it's been easier for me to play around with different looks or things that I've seen makeup artists do online. And it doesn't take much effort at all. You can throw it on in a second and it'll look good. It's a very, very forgiving formula. One of my concerns was, is it going to seem really washed out? Am I going to have to put on a lot of layers in order to make it obvious that I'm wearing color? Because it is so blendable, easily blendable. But I have found that it is still very noticeable on the eyelids. Again, it's not visible in this video, but if you take a closer look at my eyes right now, I do have three different shadows that I put on from the palette. And I've created more of like a mauve-y type of look, like a pinkish purple, almost like the color of this palette cover. So the shades that I used today were the Buon, I apologize if I'm pronouncing this incorrectly, but it was the Buon Fresco, which is this mauve color right here. It's a matte color shade. And I also used Love Letter. So Love Letter is right here. And my apologies, I just noticed that Venetian Red actually does have some sparkle in it, just like the Antique Bronze does. So that's not a matte. So I used Buon Fresco and Love Letter. So the Buon Fresco I put on higher up my eye, so I put it closer to this like where you can feel your brow bone ending almost. And then the love letter I put down a little bit lower, but still overlapping with that color, with that shade. And then the third shade that I used was this Primavera, this one right here. And I find that with Primavera and also with Vermeer, it's better to just use your finger. So it, just because it is such a thick, um, like it's not as powdery as the other shadows in the palette, so you need to dip your finger in and get the most bang for your buck that way. Um, and so the Primavera shade I just put in the middle of my eyelid, closer to the bottom. And then that was it. It was very simple. I've gotten much faster at creating different eye looks, but this one definitely is not the most dramatic one that I've created with the palette either. So, but it's been a lot of fun playing around with it. I feel like I'm going to get through this palette even faster than my Urban Decay one. And to be honest with you, I think I like this more than my Urban Decay palette, like the first one. I have the very first Urban Decay palette that I believe got discontinued. So I'm happy I have it, but I've been very excited, like just been very happy just using this palette the past month, especially because it's new to me, it's exciting. But I feel that it is definitely a worthwhile palette to look at, especially if you are interested in some of these mauve, pink, red, orange shades. But it's definitely a warm toned palette, and I think a lot of you already know that. One thing that I wanted to comment on is the brush that the palette comes with. A lot of the high-end palettes come with brushes, so of course the brush goes in here. Um, and I find that it's not a very good quality brush. It's very coarse and abrasive. It looks very synthetic. I'm not an expert in brushes, but it just, I find that it's not very good quality. It's very rough. Um, the one on the other side is a little bit better. It's softer, but I find that the Urban Decay palettes have better quality brushes. But I've ended up using this brush anyway because it's already in the palette. It's easier to reach for it than have to grab another brush that's not inside of the palette, especially if you're traveling. You don't want to grab a whole bunch of brushes. But yeah, so maybe not the best quality brush. I would expect a better quality brush from a palette that's this expensive. And I do feel that high-end palettes, including this one, are expensive. So I would expect a higher quality brush. But that's kind of the one thing that I didn't quite like. Um, what else can I say about it? I can do some swatches for you guys, for those of you that have never swatched it or whatnot. Of course, a swatch never tells the full story, but let me swatch Love Letter. It's a nice pink color. And I'll swatch Real Gar as well. And Venetian Red, Red Ochre, some of the more popular shades from the palette, I would say. So you can see that they're very powdery formulas, and they just apply better when you actually use a brush and smooth it out on your eyelid rather than doing what I'm doing right now for swatches. You can see, like, I'm taking Red Ochre here, and look at how easy it is to blend out, even just with my finger. Or if you're going like that, you can see why this formula is so easy to blend. Well, this one is not the best example of it, but so if you are curious about the palette or you are kind of debating whether or not to get it, I would say just go to your local Sephora or whatever store that sells the palette. Just swatch it, maybe even ask the employees or the staff there if you can test it out on your eyelids. I wouldn't really recommend it because it's a sample, it kind of weird, grosses me out, but at least watch it and see what you think of it. Or if you have a friend that has the palette, maybe see if they're willing to just have you try it, like do a look on you or something, like do a makeover on you, and then you can test it out that way. Or you just can take your own brush and just test it out yourself from their palette and see if it's worthwhile for you to buy. Definitely not a palette for everybody. If you're into more cool tone palettes, then this one would not necessarily be for you. But I'm certainly enjoying it and I wanted to share that with you guys. If you have any questions or comments about the palette, your opinions on it, the bad, the good, everything in between, comment down below. I really enjoy hearing or seeing your comments. And the other thing that I did want to mention was the this shade here, the Vermeer. That's a good one for your brow bone, like the actual brow bone closer to your eyebrow. And the Vermeer is also great for like the inside corners of your eyes. Today I actually used a highlighter for that, but it is a really good option to put it in there just to create more of a highlight and brightness in that area. So I've been using Vermeer for that purpose. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please subscribe. I post videos about wedding planning as well as beauty content. So makeup, face masks, face washes, and everything in between like that. So if you're interested in those things, stay tuned and I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.